Good morning, students. Welcome to your YouTube channel Atri Academy. Today in this video we will study about the life process or respiration, the 6th chapter of your 10th class science. So students, let us learn together. First of all, we start with the definition of bioprocess. All the processes occurring at the molecular level in the organisms that result in the survival of the organisms and maintenance is established in the anatomical structures. All such processes are collectively called bioprocesses. For example, nutrition, respiration, transportation and excretion. These are the four processes without which, if there is any of the four is somehow affected, then there will be a threat to the life of that organism in which these processes are affected adversely. So we can say these are the bioprocesses or life processes, because the existence of life is because of these processes. Along with this, the survival of the life in the organism, they also result the maintenance in the various organ system of the organisms, and the maintenance is done many way. We will study later on. Now we start with the respiration. What is respiration? Respiration is a complex process in which the oxygen and carbon dioxide gas are externally exchanged between the organism's respiratory organ and the atmosphere, while the internally oxidation of the food at cellular level leads to energy release. Thus there are two stages of the respiration: external respiration and the internal respiration. So here, as the definition itself speaks, tells that we will study the respiration into two stages. The first stage is external respiration, it's a physical process, and the second stage is internal respiration. Because it is constituted of the two processes, this is why it is said complex process. Complex process involves two processes: external physical process and the internal chemical process. Let me explain in detail. The external respiration, it is also called breathing, and internal respiration is also called cellular respiration. The external respiration, breathing, it is the exchange of the oxygen and carbon dioxide gas between the organism's respiratory organ and the atmosphere. There are different type of the organisms, and they have different type. They may have different type of the respiratory organs in them. Say for example, in the human beings there are lungs, in the aquatic animals there are gills, and in some insects there is another system, that is trachea and spiracle system. Now the breathing is the intake of oxygen and exhale of the carbon dioxide between the respiratory organ and the atmosphere. It is also constituted of the two steps, inhalation and exhalation. Inhalation is intake of the oxygen gas from the atmosphere into the respiratory organ of the organism. In this diagram you can see here the air, it enters through this this red arrow, inverse arrow. It indicates the entrance of the oxygen gas. Air means here the oxygen gas. Oxygen gas enters into the respiratory organ. In this picture, we have taken the example of the human beings. This is taking in the oxygen in the respiratory organ is known as inhalation, and the release of the carbon dioxide gas from the respiratory organ of the organism in the atmosphere is called exhalation. Again, in this picture you can see the gas, carbon dioxide gas, is represented by outward arrow. This gas is exhaled from the respiratory organ of the human beings. We have taken for an example, but not only in the case of human beings, it is same in rest of other organisms. Other organisms, they what kind of the respiratory organ they have, the process is the same. The exchange of the gases between the atmosphere and the respiratory organ. Because see, in the inhalation, oxygen gas is inhaled. The air which enters into the respiratory organs, it is rich in oxygen and has poor concentration of carbon dioxide. but the air present in the respiratory organ of the organisms, they are this air is rich in carbon dioxide collected from the different cells of the organisms, and it is poor in oxygen. So there is a process, physical process, it is called diffusion. Diffusion is the spontaneous flow of the molecules of any substance from the region of their higher concentration to the region of their lower concentration. Here this oxygen gas, it is being in higher concentration in the air which is inhaled from atmosphere. It is from it enters into the it diffuses into the respiratory organ of the organism. At the same time, the carbon dioxide which is present in more concentration in the air which was already existing in the respiratory organ, it is from the respiratory organ it is released into the air, which is then exhaled, So intake of the oxygen, we inhale oxygen and we exhale carbon dioxide gas. So this is a physical process, because the physical process diffusion involves in this process. It constitutes the external respiration, because we have already said that we have already stated that the respiration is constituted of the two stages. The first stage is external respiration. So this is what we explained here. The inhalation and exhalation thus completes a breathing cycle. Breathing means intake of oxygen and exhale of carbon dioxide. One intake and one exhale, it is a one cycle of breathing, and it is particularly fixed for every organism. In the stage of rest it is different, and when we do some hard work, then the respiration, the rate of breathing, it changes. We will discuss it later on in the rest part of the video. Now before we proceed, let we do some activities. The first activities is to show which gas or which gases are exhaled, means which gases they come out by exhalation. For this, it's a very simple experiment you can do well at home. Take a test tube, and into this test tube take fresh lime water. The fresh lime water is calcium hydroxide formed by the reaction between water and the quicklime, calcium oxide. Now put a cork on the test tube like this. You can see here in this picture, we have taken this test tube, and this black portion, it is the cork which is on which we put on the test tube. Now we take two L-shaped glass tube. The one L-shaped glass tube, it is merged into the lime water, and the another glass tube is taken out without in the contact of lime water. So when we blow air, this air, it passes through the lime water, as you can see here in the bubbles. This is the air blown by us. Then when this air, it passes through the lime water, the color of the lime water changes to milky white. This milky white color is because of the formation of calcium carbonate, because when carbon dioxide meets with calcium hydroxide, the lime water, it forms calcium carbonate, and this also calcium carbonate, it gives this color, milky white color, to this solution. So because we blow in the test tube, it means this carbon dioxide gas is present in the air blown, the air we exhale. So this is a very simple activity. It proves that the carbon dioxide gas is exhaled. And now there is another activity. Show that exhaled air contains water vapors in it. It's a very simple. Most of the times we do at home. Take a mirror and exhale carefully by bringing the mouth very close to it, means very close to mirror. Now exhale. When you exhale, you see that few the water drops, they appear on the mirror. Where these water vapors came from? These are because of the water vapors present in the exhaled air. So it's a very simple activity you can do at home. So the drops of water is due to the water vapor present in the exhaled air for exhalation. This activity proves that water present in the air we exhale. There is a picture here. And other than that, in the winter vacation, as the dressing sense, it represents that it is the winter. In the winter, when we exhale, some vapors, they appear to which we say fog, they appear to coming out of the mouth or the nostrils. So it is just simply because of the very low temperature, these water vapor they condense, and this is why they appear that like this. We can sense that the water vapors are coming out. So the next second stage of the respiration is cellular respiration. The cellular respiration is the oxidation of the food to produce energy in the cell of the organisms, and it is called internal respiration or the cellular respiration. For the life process to go on, every organism needs a certain amount of the energy, and this energy comes from the oxidation of the food in the cells. It is a chemical process, because oxidation is a chemical process. So this way we see that the respiration, it's the second stage of the respiration is a chemical process, the oxidation of the food. Whatever is the kind of the organism, whether unicellular organism or the higher organisms, the cell, they in them oxidize the food to produce energy, and this energy, it is stored in the form of the ATP molecules. The ATP molecules are like that the battery in the inverter, like that the electrical energy is stored in the form of the chemical energy in the electrical batteries, and at the time of when the supply of the electricity is cut, then the chemical energy stored in the battery, electrochemical battery, it is converted into the electrical energy. Similar is the case here. The energy which is released in the oxidation of the food which is formed after the digestion of the carbohydrate, the simplest form, it is the glucose. When the glucose is oxidized, it produces energy, and this energy is converted in the form of ATP molecule. ATP means adenosine triphosphate. It is energy currency of the organisms because it supply energy. We will discuss this in detail in the next section of the video. So this is the activity, the second phase of the respiration. Why the cellular respiration takes place? Because of the energy demand of the organism. So this is the oxidation. Cellular respiration is the oxidation of the food to produce energy, and it is also constituted of the it is also of two type. The internal respiration is of two type: aerobic respiration and anaerobic respiration. Aerobic respiration, it is a respiration which occurs in the cells in the presence of the oxygen. If the oxidation it takes place in the presence of the oxygen gas, it is called aerobic respiration. And further, and if the oxidation of the food in the cells takes place in the absence of the oxygen, it is called anaerobic respiration. So the cellular respiration is further of two type: aerobic respiration and anaerobic respiration. The respiration in the presence of the oxygen is called aerobic respiration, and the respiration in the absence of the oxygen is called anaerobic respiration. Aerobic respiration, if the respiration occurs in the cell in the presence of oxygen, it is called aerobic respiration, is further of two type: complete aerobic respiration and the partial aerobic respiration. This aerobic respiration is also called as pneumatic respiration. Keep it in mind, sometimes in the competitive exams you are not given aerobic, instead you can be asked pneumatic respiration. Pneumatic respiration or aerobic respiration is the same, means the respiration in the presence of oxygen. So the aerobic respiration is of two type: complete aerobic respiration and the partial. What is complete aerobic respiration? If the oxidation of the food takes place completely in the abundance of the oxygen, it is called complete aerobic respiration. Because the component which is to be oxidized, the food, the simplest form of the carbohydrate is the glucose, which is formed in the digestion, and when after digestion it is absorbed by the blood. It takes the glucose into the cells, and in the cells it is oxidized. This glucose, when oxidized by oxygen, the oxygen is sufficient, then carbon dioxide gas and water vapors, these are formed. These are the products. This is why when we exhale the gases, carbon dioxide gas and the water vapor formed in the respiration taking place in the cells, the cellular respiration. It is exhaled. This is why in the activity we just performed in the former section of this video, denoted that the water vapors and carbon dioxide are present in the exhaled gas. These are the water vapors and the carbon dioxide gas formed due to the complete oxidation. So whenever there is complete oxidation, means when there is complete supply of the oxygen gas, the products are carbon dioxide gas and water, and adenosine triphosphate, ATP molecules, these are formed, and the energy produced is comparatively much more than in the anaerobic respiration. See, this complete aerobic respiration occurs in mitochondria, because every organism, whether unicellular or multicellular, it is made of cell, and in the cell there is a system. In case of higher, let I explain. The cell contains three parts. The first, outermost, is the cell membrane, and inner to this cell membrane there is present a semi-solid substance which is called cytoplasm, and towards the center there is present another structure, it is called nucleus of the cell. And in the cytoplasm there are present many other organelles in the cell, which are called cellular organelles, like mitochondria and many others, ribosomes, endoplasmic reticulum, but it is not the topic. We are here just for mitochondria. Keep it in mind. This oxidation, the complete aerobic respiration, it completes in mitochondria. So whenever there is complete oxidation, the product is always carbon dioxide gas and water vapors, and it is found in all the upper class organisms. Upper class organisms means which have very tough and well developed cellular organization, organ system is well developed. Now the partial aerobic respiration. If the oxidation of the glucose occurs in the presence of insufficient oxygen, it is called partial aerobic, because it is the oxygen is not completely absent. There is oxygen, but it is not sufficient not so sufficient that carbon dioxide and water vapors can be formed. But rather, in this, when the oxygen is not present sufficient, the product of the oxidation of glucose is lactic acid. Lactic acid is formed, and the energy produced is comparatively lesser than the energy produced in the form of ATP molecules, where it is lesser than the energy produced in complete aerobic respiration. This usually happens during the time of the hard work in our muscles, in the muscles of the human beings or higher organisms like the mammals and other. This because at the time of hard work, the demand of the energy to do that work increases, and this demand can be filled by supply of the energy, and the energy is produced due to the respiration due to the oxidation of the food in the cells, and the oxidation needs more more oxygen, and if the oxygen is not supplied properly and in time, then instead of the complete oxidation of glucose, partial oxidation takes place, and the lactic acid is formed, and this lactic acid, it accumulates in the muscles of the human beings or other animals, or this is the cause of the fatigue, muscle cramps or severe pain, because after when we do a hard work we get fatigue. This fatigue or this muscle cramp is all because of the presence of the accumulation of this lactic acid in the muscles. Because of the incomplete oxidation of the glucose, lactic acid is formed. But later on we are suggested that whenever you do hard work and you feel this fatigue and muscle cramp, then take a bath in the hot water, or take deep breaths, take rest. When we take rest and have deep breaths, we take more oxygen, and this extra oxygen and bathing with the hot water, it increases the supply of the blood, and with this increased supply of the blood, the oxygen supply is also enhanced, and this lactic acid is further oxidized into carbon dioxide and water, and then thus with the hot water or by taking rest, this fatigue it goes on. We get relief of this fatigue. Take for instance, this C6H12O6 is a glucose molecule, and it is oxygen written here insufficient, and the lactic acid is formed. Now anaerobic respiration. Anaerobic respiration, it represents if the respiration occurs without oxygen in the cell, it is called anaerobic respiration, because it is never necessary that oxidation it occurs only in the presence of oxygen. Oxidation in lower organisms like unicellular microscopic organisms like bacteria and fungi, like yeast. Yeast is one of the microorganism fungi, and they produce an alcohol instead of carbon dioxide and water. They produce alcohol, ethanol, and carbon dioxide, and the energy is also found, but the energy is almost negligible. Very less amount of the energy is produced in the form of ATP. So this is we see that in aerobic respiration, in internal respiration, the respiration is the simple oxidation of the glucose to produce energy, and it is of two types, aerobic and anaerobic. Aerobic respiration is further of two types, complete aerobic respiration and partial aerobic respiration. The product of the complete aerobic respiration is carbon dioxide and water, and the energy produced is in the form of ATP molecule is more in this complete aerobic respiration. And in anaerobic respiration, the oxygen is not sufficient, so the product is lactic acid, which is responsible for the fatigue and cramping of the muscles. And in case when there is no oxygen at all, anaerobic respiration takes place, and it takes place in the lower organisms like microorganism, yeast, and whatever is the kind of respiration, aerobic or anaerobic. The first part, it takes place in the cytoplasm. It takes place in the cytoplasm, and later on it takes place in the mitochondria. See here, oxidation or the fragmentation of the glucose by the various pathway. In this you can see here, it is written here in Hindi, I forget and translating, so please don't mind. The glucose molecules, it is as I denoted you here, glucose, the molecular formula of glucose is C6H12O6. It means it contains 6 carbon atom in it. This 6 carbon containing glucose molecule in the cytoplasm converted into pyruvate, a 6 carbon containing molecule. This is the first step. Whether it is aerobic respiration or anaerobic respiration, the first step always takes place in the cytoplasm. After the formation of the pyruvate, this pyruvate, in case of when there is sufficient oxygen, the next process, the further oxidation of pyruvate into carbon dioxide and water molecules, it takes place in mitochondria, and a large amount of the energy is formed in the form of ATP. Now, if the oxygen is not sufficient, like in the case of the muscles, then the pyruvate is oxidized into lactic acid, and energy produced here is comparatively lesser than complete oxidation, aerobic respiration. And now in case of the lower organisms like the yeast, there is no oxygen at all, and when there is no oxygen, this pyruvate, it is oxidized into ethanol and carbon dioxide gas, and the energy form is very, very, very less. So this is the comparative study in nutshell. Now we discussed about the difference between the breathing and the respiration. Respiration is a complex biochemical process in which the oxidation or degradation of the food occurs. Just I said, it is a stage in which the chemical changes they take place, because these changes are belonging with the biology, so these are called the biological changes. And breathing, it's a physical process of the exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide gas, because the exchange of the carbon dioxide gas and oxygen gas in the respiratory organ is all because of the physical process diffusion. So it is a physical process. And now the second difference is of this process, respiration, it takes place in mitochondria, while breathing it takes place in the lungs in case of human beings, but in case of other organisms it takes place in the respiratory organ. So according to the organism, what is the type of its respiratory organ, the breathing takes place in that, is confined to that. Means in case of the aquatic animals, it is confined to the gills, and in the insect it is with the tracheal system. The third difference between the respiration and breathing is that the energy produced in respiration is comparatively more in the form of ATP, while there is no energy generated at all in breathing, because breathing is just the physical process of exchange of the gases carbon dioxide and oxygen. Now we discuss about the difference between aerobic and anaerobic respiration. Aerobic respiration, which is also called pneumatic respiration, and anaerobic respiration. Aerobic respiration generates more energy, just I said, while anaerobic respiration, it generates lesser energy in the form of ATP molecules. The second difference is the aerobic respiration, it takes place in mitochondria, while anaerobic respiration takes place in cytoplasm. I said irrespective of the respiration, whether aerobic or anaerobic, the first step of the oxidation of glucose into pyruvate, it takes place in cytoplasm, every organism. But because in the lower organisms there is not well developed organization of the organelles in the cell, this is why the further process in case of this anaerobic respiration, it takes place in the same at the same place in the cytoplasm of the cell. The third difference is that aerobic respiration takes place in all the upper organisms, means those organisms which have well developed organ system and well developed cellular organization. Now in case of aerobic respiration, it occurs in lower classes organisms like bacteria and fungi, like the yeast cell. The fourth difference is that this respiration occurs in the presence of oxygen, aerobic respiration, while anaerobic in the absence of oxygen. Fifth difference is that it is misprinted here. The fifth difference is that the product of this aerobic respiration are carbon dioxide and water. Go with it, read it this. The product of the aerobic respiration are carbon dioxide and water, while the product of anaerobic respiration are ethanol and carbon dioxide with less energy. Now in detail we study about the ATP. ATP stands for adenosine triphosphate. It is the energy currency of the most of the cellular process, means it's the energy currency. Let I explain how. Energy released in respiration, it is used in the formation of ATP. Let I explain here. See, this ADP stands for adenosine diphosphate. Di means 2 plus 1 organic inorganic phosphate. The energy which is released in the oxidation is taken up by the phosphate molecule, phosphate atom to bind with ADP, because this energy it is converted into the chemical in the chemical form, in the bond, chemical bond. This ADP, it's a wavy line, it indicates the energy bond between ADP and phosphate. Now because the two phosphate atoms were already existing in ADP, adenosine diphosphate, there is another addition of the third phosphate, so it becomes ATP, adenosine triphosphate. This adenosine triphosphate, it is this energy currency, because whenever there is a need of energy to execute any process like muscles relaxation, contraction, and the conduction of the impulses and speech and whatever, the energy is released by this ATP molecules, because it's Formation of ATP molecules from ADP and inorganic phosphate is a reversible process. At the time of the production of energy, ATP it dissociates back into ADP and phosphate atom. Now the energy which was absorbed earlier in the formation of ATP is released, and this again becomes ADP plus phosphate. It is like that charging and discharging of the electrochemical battery. In the electrochemical battery, at the time of the supply of the electricity, it keep on charging, and when the electrical supply is cut, then this chemical energy which is stored in the battery is converted back into electrical energy. Similar is the case here. In ATP molecule, the chemical energy is stored in the form of this energy rich bond. This is shown here in ADP wavy line phosphate ATP. This energy bond it breaks down again and it forms ADP and phosphate, and energy is released. Now when its bonds, it means ATP's bonds are broken down back, it is converted into ADP or adenosine diphosphate, and energy released is fixed. It is 30.5 kilojoule per mole. Means like that in case there is a particular battery, it supplies 12 volt, it supplies 9 volt of the current. Similar is it is fixed also for ATP. Whenever this ATP it dissociates back into ADP and inorganic phosphate, it releases 30.5 kilojoule energy per mole. When oxidation takes place, the energy released in the oxidation is again used up for the formation of ATP. So it is a reversible process, keep on going. So energy is stored this way. So we can say this ATP is a energy unit or energy currency in the organisms, and this energy is used for many functions like muscular contraction, protein synthesis, nerve impulse and transmission. Now let me study why